Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Redzone Rodeo. We are so thrilled and happy to have you all with us. I am your co-host Carson, and I'm here with our other co-host Rob, and we're going to be bringing to you some great football content in regards to what has been happening the past couple weeks, and break it all down for you, discuss it, and see what conclusions we can come to. So without further ado, we're going to launch right into it. But before we do, if you enjoy our channel, our content, you like what we're doing, want to support us, please think about liking these videos, subscribing, and sharing amongst your friends. The community will only be built with the help of you all. So thank you all for doing this. And without further ado, let's jump on in. All right. So the first topic that we have to talk about is breaking down the recap of the UFL Week 6. And how are we going to start things off, Rob?
Well, Carson, I'm sure this made you at least somewhat happy for, most of the game. The Houston Roughnecks actually had some surprising success against the dominant Battlehawks offense. And so I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? How do you think they were able to do it? And is this a good sign for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. This was a super big surprise for me. The St. Louis Battlehawks have the most dominant offense in the UFL right now. They're ranked number one. And going into this game, I really, really kind of felt that it was going to be a blowout. The Roughnecks defense has been good, but it hasn't been that good in terms of, what I thought of, the defense was going to look like before the season started, especially on paper. But I was thoroughly surprised. The defense really showed up. I think, Houston was able to exploit the offensive line troubles of St. Louis, and they were able to get to the quarterback. They were able to break down some of those plays, and they were able to cover, the wide receiver core of the league in regards to the best. And I think that was something that, was super shocking for me. And I think for a lot of people watching this game, especially in the harsh environment of St. Louis. I mean, there was, I believe, over 30,000 fans in attendance of this game. Creates, an ambience for, distraction for these visiting teams, something that Houston hasn't really had to play up against because, they haven't really faced the numbers in the stands as they did against St. Louis. But thoroughly surprised. We were able to get sacks on the quarterback. We were able to break up those plays. And really, honestly, I think the Roughnecks offense really shot themselves in the foot more times than not. Mark Thompson had some really great plays. He showed his elusiveness as a running back position. And Reed Sinnett did his best to kind of stick in the pocket. I really think that the Houston offensive line actually really faltered in this game as well, which allowed many quarterback hits, many sacks, and a couple QB mistakes. And so, maybe if those things had been, shored up, then maybe this Houston Roughnecks team could have been able to upset the St. Louis Battlehawks. But it was a very close game, down to the wire, really down to the fourth quarter before the Battlehawks started to really pull away. But hats off to the Roughnecks defense. I think this is a positive sign that, this defense can gel together and can stop these dominant offensive teams in the league that are near the top. But they just weren't able to get the job done, which proves that there's still many holes that still need to be filled, especially on that offense and keeping up with that scoring power. And so, it's a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, sitting at 1-5, I don't think the Roughnecks are going to be able to save their season. I think it could be done. The only way is that the Roughnecks, I think, have to win the rest of their games, and they're going to have to hope that the Michigan Panthers lose the rest of their games. I think that's the only way that the Roughnecks are able to even get a spot. So realistically speaking, though, it doesn't look like it's going to be their season to go on to the playoffs. But moving into the offseason, if there is no realignment, there isn't any teams switching around and going to different locations, I do think that this Houston team will be better going into year 2 than it was year 1 by just some of these kind of glimpses of success. like the defense was able to stop the Battlehawks offense. So things to be positive about, but you know, taking a step back and looking at the whole situation, there still is a lot of problems on this roster, a lot of problems on this team, and unfortunately, they're most likely going to be missing the playoffs due to that.
Yeah, I think a huge part of the Roughnecks' ability to shut down St. Louis's offense for a lot of the game was actually twofold. The first big reason, in my opinion, is the Battlehawks had a lot of injuries on that offensive line, and the Roughnecks were able to get a lot of pressure on AJ McCarron. And way back at the beginning of the season, when we were first talking about how dominant this Battlehawks offense could be, we said the number one thing that you could do to slow them down was to get pressure on McCarron, because as loaded as they are at the skill positions, as great as McCarron is, their offensive line, it's average. It's not like gonna, give them an eternity to stand in the pocket and throw the football. And especially when it's banged up and missing key pieces, it was pretty vulnerable. And the Roughnecks, they have a very impressive defensive line. A lot of talent: Reuben Foster, Chris Odom. They just have a lot of guys on that defensive line who are capable of making plays, especially against a bunch of backups. I think the second reason that the Roughnecks had so much defensive success, at least for like the first three or so quarters, the Battlehawks were very, very conservative in their offensive play calling. They did not take a lot of deep shots at all through those first 3.5 quarters. Then, once things started to unravel, you saw the Battlehawks throwing the ball down the field a lot more. And they consistently found success with that, which is kind of a pattern I've noticed with the Roughnecks, where their front seven usually plays fantastic, but then their back end of the defense is a little leaky because I remember the Renegades Roughnecks game. There were a lot of open receivers deep in the Roughnecks secondary. Luis Perez missed a lot of them, granted, but they were still there and they were open. So it seems to me like that Roughnecks front seven is pretty close to perfect, or as perfect as you can be in a spring football league, shutting down the run, keeping everything underneath closed off. And for whatever reason, that's kind of what the Battlehawks ran like head first into for almost the entire game with that injured offensive line. So it didn't really seem like the best sort of game planning from them when they have all these weapons that they can throw the ball deep to. Once they really started airing it out more, I feel like that's when they found their momentum. That's when they started to look like the old Battlehawks that we all were expecting to see for the majority of the game. And so I think if the Battlehawks want to continue to be a successful offensive team, they need to remember like what their bread and butter is, and that's like the deep ball to Pearson and Butler and Aitman and Darius Shepard. They have so many playmakers on the outside. They can't just shut down and not use them if they want to be successful. That's their huge advantage over everybody else, is that their wide receivers are always better than what your secondary is. There's not a secondary in the UFL that has a chance at competing with these guys. As long as they can throw the ball deep and get some protection for AJ McCarron, they will continue to be the most explosive offense of the UFL.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, shifting topics a little bit to your team, Rob. Um, do you believe that the Renegades are the most embarrassing franchise in sports?
Yeah, yeah, it's honestly hard to say that they're not right now. It doesn't matter what sport you look at. All the worst teams in those sports, at least they try, right? At least they put up a good fight sometimes. The Renegades, they might put up a good fight in terms of like keeping the score close and even having the lead late in the game. But it seems like in the biggest possible moments, this team just folds. They just give up. I mean, if you think back to the game this past weekend, they had a lead. There was a minute left, and almost like a complete repeat of what happened previously this year against the Defenders. They give up a huge 70-yard kickoff return, then get a face mask penalty, which adds 15 more yards onto that return and already puts the team in field goal range to take the lead. So all they have to do is run the clock out. If you had not given up a huge return, not getting that penalty, you probably win this game. But of course, because you are who you are, and that is a bunch of losers, you just immediately fold as soon as you have a chance to actually win a game. And it's not like it's just a coincidence at this point. This is a pattern. This is something that just happens. This is something that's in their DNA. They are losers. When it matters the most, they will give up. They will mess up. They will fold like a deck of cards. They're not good. It's embarrassing to watch. No matter what other team you could think of and what other professional sports league, I have never seen anything like this where a team just collapses so entirely anytime they can even sniff success, especially with such a talented roster. That's what makes them the most embarrassing, right? A lot of bad teams in other sports have really bad rosters with no talent on them. This is a very talented team. They won a championship last year. They should at least be up there, like contending for a playoff spot right now. and they're nowhere close because they just get in their own way in a way I've never seen a team do before. And that's embarrassing. It's more embarrassing than I think any other team in major sports right now, whether that be football, basketball, hockey, baseball, whatever you want to talk about. This is more embarrassing than that because they have all the tools to get the job done and they just lack the will to do it. And that's humiliating for a football team. So,
Yeah, it's really tragic, the way the Renegades have been, going from champions to this kind of rapid decline where there's this lack of trying and really lack of discipline. And it's going to be interesting what they do in the off season. I know that we've been talking a little bit about potential realignment, maybe certain teams being moved elsewhere. I don't believe the Renegades will be moved. I think the Renegades will stay, but it's certainly something that needs to be fixed in order for you to build a strong fan base. You obviously you built it by winning the championship, but you need to follow up that success. And maybe that doesn't mean winning every single championship down the road, but if your team is making mistakes like this that cost them games in very close moments where they should have easily won, or had a better chance of winning, it's hard to build a culture in the region, in that city, because the fact of the matter is no one wants to root for a losing team. Only the diehards really stick around for that team. Most, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of fans end up staying tuned into this league, into the team, whatever the league is, whatever the team is, when they're winning, and you see that across the board when it comes to sports. And so the Renegades really need to turn it around in regards of this. They need to show some premise, some hope, especially with 3-4 games being left in the season. They need to show the fans of Arlington and the league that they can compete. That they certainly had some mistakes, but they have the ability to work towards a goal of fixing them. And I think that's something that the Renegades need to do moving forward. Not that they're probably going to lose their team, but they most likely will lose a lot of their fan base, and that's going to be detrimental when this league is trying to stick around for years and years to come. So hopefully the Renegades get it figured out. Hopefully Bob Stoops can get some more discipline in this team. But if not, it's going to get even more slippery of a slope for this team, for the players on the team, the coaching staff, and the fan base.
I almost want to say entitlement. Really, that's the way it kind of feels like. We won the championship last year, and they kind of just expected everything to be handed to them this season. They didn't think they'd really have to go out there and compete. They're like, oh yeah, we lost a bunch of games and we still won a championship last year. Who really cares? That feels kind of like the attitude they've approached this season with. Who really cares what happens? They expect things to be handed to them, and that is absolutely the worst attitude you could have, not just in football but in any sport. And it's embarrassing. It's really embarrassing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Carson, I'm so excited to watch this game this weekend. But the St. Louis Battlehawks, obviously, we just talked about them having the best offense in football versus the Birmingham Stallions this weekend, who have the best defense in football. I think they have more sacks right now than every other team in the league combined, or some crazy stat like that. Just an insane amount of pressure with that defensive line. So these seem like obviously the two best teams in the league right now. Is this a sneak peek of the UFL championship this season, Carson?
I honestly think it probably is. I mean, when you look at the top teams in this league, obviously we have that kind of illustrative point that the top scoring offense and defense is these teams. It's the Battlehawks and it's the Stallions, and I would even say both teams' defense and offense, respectively, they're also very good. And so this is really going to be obviously this game in that's upcoming this weekend between the Battlehawks and the Stallions. It's going to be probably one of the better games of this season, where it's these two top teams pitched against each other. And if you look around the league, realistically, I mean, you really have a two-team race in the USFL conference because the Showboats and the Roughnecks are kind of done. They need to win out and they need Michigan to lose out, which is a lot to ask. And so it's looking like it's going to be the Stallions versus the Panthers, which of course could be a tough game in regards to, I would say that was one of the closer games that the Stallions played was against the Panthers. But especially with EJ Perry out and whatnot, there's a lot of question marks for that Panthers team. So it's looking like the Stallions are that dominant team, and they are the dominant team in the USFL conference. And so they're probably going to be the heavyweight champion in that side of the UFL to make it to the playoffs. And if you look on the Battlehawks side in regards to, their conference with the XFL, the top teams are the Brahmas and the Defenders. But right now, the Brahmas and the Defenders are pretty much battling each other for that second spot. It really seems like the Battlehawks have solidified that number one spot. So absolutely, I think this could be a sneak peek preview of the UFL championship. I think both of these teams are probably the best in the league in regards to, the offensive and defensive weapons that each team has. And I think even for the UFL, having their home team, St. Louis, where the championship will be held, having their team in the championship is only going to be bigger for that city, bigger for the league. And obviously, that doesn't mean that, I'm thinking that they're going to fix it or whatnot. But the Battlehawks being great and then them going and playing in the UFL championship pretty much as a home game, that's going to be crazy and a big bonus for the Battlehawks and for the league itself. So absolutely, I think this could be a sneak peek preview of the championship, and I think both of these teams could absolutely put on a show and maybe do it twice in a row for the season, with it being this upcoming weekend and then a number of weekends down the road for the championship.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is almost inevitable at this point. Really, the only way I see this not happening, the Battlehawks were one of the better teams in the XFL last year, and then they got upset in the playoffs by a team nobody really gave a chance. So anything could happen, and the Battlehawks, maybe they have a propensity for choking in the playoffs. We don't know if that's a pattern yet or just something that happened one time and won't happen again this year. But they should absolutely be favored going into any matchup they have in that first round of the playoffs. So if they lose again in the first round this year, I think you might start looking at that as kind of a pattern, as something that the Battlehawks continuously struggle with. But really, that's the only way I see either one of these teams missing the championship round of the playoffs is if the Battlehawks choke like they did last year in the first round, and let the Defenders or the Brahmas sneak by them. So absolutely, I think this is most likely a preview of the UFL championship. Oh man, Carson, I know you were excited about this signing. Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Tyler Boyd, who was a free agent this year, has signed with the Tennessee Titans. So, what do you think his impact will be on the Titans' offense this year, Carson?
Well, I think if you remember a number of months ago, prior to the draft, prior to really, free agency, Tyler Boyd was one of the names that kept, circulating in and out of, the Titans kind of rumors and who are we going to be bringing in at wide receiver? Of course, that was a position that we needed. And whether it was, that whole thing about, oh, T. Higgins is coming to Tennessee. Well, if T. Higgins isn't coming to Tennessee, what about Tyler Boyd? Tyler Boyd might even be better than T. Higgins in this scheme, all that stuff. And of course, then we had free agency. Calvin Ridley joined the roster. And then, we ended up adding pieces in the draft as well. But one thing I think a lot of people are forgetting is that the Titans still have a lot of cap space still to work with. And so when there was rumors out there that, Tyler Boyd is still available and he's looking and he's meeting with the Titans, Zay Jones is meeting with the Titans, some of those higher up names, it started to become more of a reality that one of these two guys would be signing with the Titans. And I'm really excited that Tyler Boyd was the name that they picked. Not only is there connections between Tyler Boyd and Brian Callahan, our new head coach, who's obviously worked with Tyler Boyd and ran the offense for Cincinnati last year. But Tyler Boyd is a competent and repetitive receiver. in regards to what he can do each season. He's been able to kind of rack up every single season he's been in the league, a number of touchdowns, 600, 700 yards per season, and has just been a really reliable receiver. Maybe not that number one guy, but certainly a great number three, good slot receiver. Someone that, if your top two are marked pretty heavily, he can sometimes get some sneaky yardage in, and he's a capable receiver that if you put the ball in his hands, he's able to still do stuff with it. Rather than having somebody who may or may not be able to fit your system or may not be able to work with the ball. So this is honestly a great signing, I think, for the Titans, and I think this is going to be a different offense. As you know, the Titans have been run first for a very long time with Derrick Henry, and with Derrick Henry being gone now, this is going to be a new Titans offensive look. And I know that there's been some concerns in regards to age. A lot of the Titans' new additions at receiver are more older players. But I really do think that the Titans are setting up Will Levis and the rest of their organization offensively for success now. They're kind of in a win now mode. Maybe not this year. Obviously, there's going to be a big push, but in the next couple years, they're trying to build something that, can go out there and dominate. And especially with having the receivers with DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, and now Tyler Boyd, you really do have an impactful wide receiver trio that you're able to utilize if Will Levis can be able to take that next step going into his second year. And I think that's the one thing that Titans fans are going to know by the end of this upcoming season is Will Levis going to be it? Because if not, well, then we're going to unfortunately have to go back to the drawing board and figure some things out. But for those who believe that he is, like myself, adding another veteran receiver like Tyler Boyd is not only going to help Levis's growth in the system, especially putting competent players around him. So I think the impact for the Titans offense is great. And for anybody that's doubting this offense, I would say watch out, because there are certainly some weapons that this team has now. They're, I would say, 10 times better offensively than they were last year. And I think that, this team could be sneaky good off on offense and could even, sneak its way into a playoff, if not further.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the signing, Carson. I mean, you already have two like older, slower receivers on your team. Adding a third one to like be the starting wide receiver rotation, I don't know. I feel like if you were gonna try to fill that role, you'd kind of want like a younger, faster guy to kind of complement, what you already have in DeAndre Hopkins, who's like a big-bodied possession receiver, can go up and make jump balls. I mean, that's basically also what Tyler Boyd is, right? He doesn't have any like elite speed or anything like that. He's also just kind of like a big body that can
Mm,
go up there and make impressive catches. So then I also think about the fact, if that's really what the Titans wanted, was another guy who doesn't really have a lot of speed but has a big body and can make impressive catches, and can actually play the slot pretty well. I think, well, didn't you just spend a first round pick 2 years ago on a guy that exactly like fits that profile? I mean, Braylon Burks, I think his comp coming out of college was Tyler Boyd. So now you went out and got Tyler Boyd instead, who's almost 30 now. When you have this young, like allegedly promising rookie sitting on the bench, it doesn't seem like the wisest decision to me to bring in another slow, big-bodied receiver because you already have multiple of them on your roster, and now it almost seems like you're kind of progress stopping Jalen Burks, if that makes sense. Like I feel like Burks would have had his best chance this season to really make an impact as a slot wide receiver with D Hop and Ridley taking the pressure off of him on the outside. And now you're not even really going to give him the chance to get on the field because Boyd is going to come in and take that role instead. So I don't think this is a good sign for Traylon Burks. And I honestly don't know how much this moves the needle for the Titans independently either. Because, like I said, you already have these guys on your team. So adding another one, I'm not really sure what that does for you. And also, you were talking about how this sets them up for the future. I'm not sure if it does that either because Boyd is here on a 1 year deal. He's already 30. We don't know how much longer DeAndre
mm,
Hopkins is going to be in the league for. Calvin Ridley's almost 30. We don't know how much longer he'll be in the league for. It seems like this is a very much a win now, right move. Win right now move. And the Titans are like, well, you know what? Tyler Boyd is better than Traylon Burks right now. So we're going to sign Tyler Boyd because he's better than what we have in Burks, and that gives us a better chance to win this year. So maybe in the Titans' mind, this is kind of like their version of all in, to borrow a quote from Jerry Jones.
Mhm.
I thought it was curious. I'm not exactly sure this is going to work out. This experiment where there's like a bunch of older, slower guys playing wide receiver for Will Levis. But maybe they'll all prove me wrong and go crazy this year with Will Levis at quarterback. My gut feeling is that this was not a great move for Tennessee. So
You know, when I look at this, I think the key that you even brought up was that 1 year deal that he is on, and I do think that, as I was talking about Tyler Boyd and what he can do on the field, you're right. It is very similar to why we drafted Traylon Burks. But for the past 3 years, what has Traylon Burks done? He's not really been that competent guy. He was barely the number two dude in the system. He kept getting injured. He kept getting hurt. He did not see much time on the field. And when you're talking about a guy that can potentially fit your system, what happens this year if Traylon Burks doesn't break out? Who are you going to have to step in and fill that void? Because I absolutely still believe that the Titans organization has the utmost faith in Traylon Burks. And I do believe that he still is their project moving forward. And even, Brian Callahan, when he's been asked about Traylon Burks, especially after this signing, he has been very, direct that he still likes what he sees in Burks and he thinks that he's going to have a breakout season this year. So really the question is, I think is, who is going to be that wide receiver 3? Who is going to be that slot guy? Is Traylon Burks going to finally be able to show himself the guy that was in college and be this guy number 3 and not be, this, oh, well, he's a project that we just unfortunately swung and missed on in the draft. And I think bringing in Tyler Boyd, it adds competition. So it forces Traylon Burks to finally make that move if he can. And if he can, well, then we have a much younger, bigger receiver to play, slot. If not, well, then we're still covered because Tyler Boyd can step in and be that guy. So I don't think necessarily Traylon Burks' future is diminished now with Tyler Boyd signing. I think honestly, it's a signing that shows that, hey, you need to step up and show us. And this is year 4 of what we drafted you to be in the first round. And if you can't do that, well, then we're going to have to move on. And I think that that's going to be very interesting moving forward. But I think that's going to lead us into the next question, Rob, and that you have been seeing some
yeah.
rumors
hmm
about Traylon Burks being dealt to Dallas. And before I go on my spiel about it, which I was about to go on, but I didn't want to get ahead of myself, I would like to hear what you think about Traylon Burks being traded to Dallas. What would you give up for him? What do you think that package would be? Do you think he'd be good in your system? And do you even want him?
Well, the Cowboys need a wide receiver number 3 right now. Michael Gallup left after we cut him. He wasn't the same guy after the injury. We have Jalen Tolbert, and we draft who he's had a okay couple of years, hasn't really had a lot of chances. So who knows what we have with him? We drafted a guy in the 6th round, Ryan Flournoy, who I'm pretty high on, but again, he's a 6th round pick, so who knows what we have in him? The Cowboys really lack like a solid, like proven option third wide receiver spot. And not that Traylon Burks is that, because he certainly is not proven or solid in any way, shape, or form. But he has a lot of potential, right? He was drafted in the 1st round for a reason. He is slow. He is really slow. And that really hinders his ability to gain separation in the NFL. I think he ran like a 4.6 or something like that. But if you look at his college ability, it seemed like he really was able to separate a lot better going out of the slot, which, it's traditionally easier to run routes and gain separation out of the slot. So that makes sense. And he never really got a chance to play in the slot in Tennessee. He was always like an outside receiver just because of how big he was and how slow he was. So I'd be curious to see what the Cowboys could do with him manning the slot receiver position, and then maybe occasionally kicking out to X where Michael Gallup used to play. In terms of what we'd give up for him, I imagine it could not be more than a 5th round pick. Like you said, he's had 3 years in the league at this point, and he's done absolutely nothing with it. So there's no value there right now. And the Cowboys have a ton of compensatory picks next year in the draft, and I'm sure they're going to move at least a few of them before the season starts to get players like this, with a high ceiling, but not necessarily proven, to see if they can help the roster this year. So in terms of the Titans actually trading him, I think you made a really important point that he's in his fourth year right now. So no matter what happens this year, the Titans will lose control of him because they did not pick up his fifth year option. Am I correct in saying that, right? They did
I
not
don't
pick
think
up
they've
his
fully, yeah, I don't think they fully decided that yet, and I think it's really going to hinge on how he plays.
well, I think the deadline passed for them to pick his fifth year
Oh, did
option
it?
because they
So yeah,
yeah, they
then
can't
no.
do it like at the end of this coming season. So that means he's going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year.
Mhm.
And if you're the Titans, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, do we just want to let him walk in free agency, or do we actually want to get something for him? Because in all probability, he's the fourth wide receiver on this depth chart right now. How much
Mhm.
of a chance is he really going to get to prove himself playing as that number four guy? And maybe they wait for training camp to happen to see if he really has a breakout there before they decide to move on from him. But I really believe his time in Tennessee is over because of this Tyler Boyd signing. Because, like I said, this is his last year. Keeping him on your bench as your number four wide receiver will not return you any value when he leaves in free agency next year, unless you somehow re-sign him on like a really cheap deal. But I don't think he'd probably want that. He'd probably want to go somewhere with better, like a change of scenery, right, to give himself a better chance at finding his way onto a depth chart. So if this is likely his last year, and if he likely is the number four guy on your depth chart, you probably want to get something in exchange for him instead of just letting him leave. I could definitely see Tennessee shopping him right now. And one of the teams that, definitely need some wide receiver depth because they lost a guy like Michael Gallup is the Dallas Cowboys with a ton of compensatory picks, which is about what I think his value would be to shop with. So this almost seems too easy to kind of draw this link here, to draw this connection. The real question will be, do the Cowboys feel comfortable offering draft capital for a guy like Traylon Burks, who, like you said, hasn't really done anything in the NFL? And I think with the way their roster is right now, the answer to that question probably will be yes, even if it's just like a sixth round pick to get some more competition in training camp this year at that wide receiver spot. But another element to this is Zay Jones was in Dallas today, and the Cowboys released a wide receiver as he was visiting. So it seems like him signing in Dallas is probably something that's going to happen soon. So if they get Zay Jones, he might kind of fill the role that Traylon Burks would otherwise fill. Um, so I would say it's probably contingent on that. I don't think they would sign Zay Jones and trade for Traylon Burks. I think if Zay Jones goes and signs somewhere else, then you would probably see it a lot more likely. I think it's contingent on that. If Zay Jones goes somewhere else, I think the Cowboys will trade for Traylon Burks.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that happening. I still don't think the Titans are ready to let him go. Even for even draft capital. Um, I really do think that there is still hope that he will turn into a top receiver. And I think that, there is still that hope because he is young compared to the rest of the wide receiver room. And when you're also building for the future, you know, Traylon Burks has also not had it easy in regards to previous, regimes being, a different GM drafts you and now he's out the door. A head coach that didn't really have a lot of faith and trust in you. So you didn't really see field time that much because, you weren't as reliable. Well, now this is all change. You have a new head coach, second year new GM, and last year we saw the struggles between Rand Carthon and Mike Vrabel. And now that whole dichotomy that really kind of tore apart the locker room, it's now gone. And you have the owner, GM, and head coach all now working all together, finally, for the first time in a while in Titans history. And you have a head coach that is more offensively minded. So I would be absolutely I would not be okay, I would say I would not be shocked if Traylon Burks has his breakout year this year. And I would not be shocked if Traylon Burks ends up showing why he was drafted in the first round and he may even be competing to get that spot and gain that spot back from Tyler Boyd, who's also on a 1-year deal, which means he can walk afterwards in regards to that. I think Traylon Burks' youth is what's going to keep him in Tennessee because as you mentioned, most of these receivers are older gentlemen, are older guys. DeAndre Hopkins even ended up, having this kind of cryptic message that was people were linking to him retiring in Tennessee. So this could potentially be his last year. Calvin Ridley, I will still die on that hill. He is a lot younger of a receiver when it comes to wear and tear on his body than most receivers his age. And I do think that he's going to be around a lot longer, even though he is an older guy. But Tyler Boyd's only here for 1 year. I think, the Tyler Boyd signing was more of a safety net just in case Traylon Burks doesn't work out. But I think the hope still is that he does and that he's here to stick around, especially, since we're not really paying him much to stick around, for this fourth year. Now, fifth year is going to be different. We may have to pay him a little bit more, but, for now, he's pretty cheap to keep around. And I don't know if the Titans are going to be willing to trade away this kind of unproven asset yet with this new regime setting in. To just basically set themselves up for having only really one young rookie receiver on their roster for a couple years, in the future. So I don't know. It could be interesting. Traylon Burks to Dallas. We'll obviously see. I think your point was right with Zay Jones. That was actually going to be my question: is like, would you rather take Zay Jones or Traylon Burks? And I think you would say Zay Jones. So
Well, probably just because Zay Jones is a little bit faster, even though he's also, 29, going to be 30 this season.
mhm.
It was really bad last year. Uh, I'd probably still lean just a little bit towards Zay Jones just because, like I said, he's a little faster, and I think that's important. But I think Burks definitely has the higher ceiling. So honestly, if it was up to me, it'd probably be a coin toss right now because I think Zay Jones is more of a guarantee to help you this year. But Traylon Burks could obviously be something much better than what Zay Jones is right now. And so it's kind of a risk if you go Burks over Zay Jones. But I feel like the Cowboys are leaning pretty heavily right now towards signing Zay Jones and not trading for Traylon Burks. Not that they necessarily have to be mutually exclusive, but yeah, I definitely could see the Cowboys being interested because they have all this late draft capital next year that they're definitely going to want to move at least a few of those picks. And I think Burks makes sense as a trade target just because this is the last year of his deal and he hasn't really done much. Now there's three guys ahead of him on the depth chart. So
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. I still have hope he will stay on the roster. I think that, I've certainly seen the untapped potential in a number of his games, especially his rookie year. Honestly, it's just been injuries that has kept him off the field. And that's also been something that the Titans have been changing as well. Like they've completely redone their whole medical staff and whatnot because that's been an issue for many years. So we'll see in terms of athletic trainers and whatnot. Will they help in terms of keeping him healthy? And if he can stay on the field the whole season, what can he do? So I don't know. I feel at least it would be my hope that the Titans retain him because of still that untapped potential that he still, holds. But if they feel like it's run its course, if they feel like they've seen enough and they don't want to necessarily, you know, um, extend that olive branch for another year, then yeah, I think they'll try to take the best offer they have on the table, especially if they can flip him for a pick to hopefully maybe get a receiver that he couldn't be in the next upcoming draft. So hope Burke stays, but if he does end up going to Dallas, it would be a smart move for the Cowboys in terms of trying to unlock that potential. All righty, Rob. Well, recently, XFL star quarterback Ben DiNucci for the Seattle Sea Dragons, um, he unfortunately was recently released by the Denver Broncos, which is where he has been on the roster ever since the end of the XFL season last year. But his release actually kind of opens up a lot of new doors. And this is, I think, more speculation than anything. But with Ben DiNucci free, will we see Ben DiNucci return to the UFL for a team that's struggling quarterback wise? Will he end up going to another NFL team? Will he retire? Will he stop playing football? Who knows? But Rob, where do you think Ben DiNucci will end up if you had to choose and pick?
Honestly, I'm between 2 teams right now, and one's in the UFL and one's in the NFL. The first one in the NFL is the Dallas Cowboys because the Cowboys, they drafted Ben DiNucci originally in the 7th round. Mike McCarthy picked him. Mike McCarthy loves Ben DiNucci. Cowboys fans love Ben DiNucci. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but during his time in Dallas, he started a fashion brand of accessories that were just like Dallas themed. And he would go on radio shows all the time. He was a personality that Cowboys fans really loved. All the Cowboys players loved him. He was a great locker room presence. And Mike McCarthy, like I said, absolutely loves this guy like his own kid. So if he's going to stay in the NFL, I could certainly see the Cowboys being like, "Hey, why don't you come on over to our practice squad?" Because right now, I think the Cowboys do need a fourth quarterback for training camp. Most teams do usually carry 4 quarterbacks into training camp, and right now the Cowboys only have 3 in Dak, Cooper Rush, and Trey Lance. So I could definitely see Ben DiNucci being brought in just to at least be like a training camp body or something like that. If it was going to be with any NFL team, I think it would be the Cowboys. Obviously, there's still a chance he could go sign with anyone else because like he'd probably be the 4th quarterback on anyone's roster right now. So it doesn't really matter which NFL team signs him because it's not like he's really going to have a realistic chance to start. But if I had to pick one, it would be the Cowboys just because of that Mike McCarthy, Ben DiNucci connection. The other thing I was thinking about is there's a UFL team right now that has a pretty good defense. They have some playmakers on offense. Their offensive line hasn't been bad, but their quarterback, who everyone expected to be good this year, has been surprisingly not so great. And the reason they haven't won more games than they currently have is because their offense has let them down quite a few times. The team I'm talking about is the DC Defenders, right? They just beat the San Antonio Brahmas very surprisingly, in my opinion. A lot of people had the Brahmas picked to win that game on the strength of their defense, but they only scored 18 total points. Their offense has continuously struggled in almost every game this season, outside of like 1 or 2 aberrations where they were much better than they have been for the rest of the season. And a lot of that has been the fault of Jordan Thomas, who just has not been the same guy this year. If I were the DC Defenders and I'm like, we're really contending for a playoff spot right now. We just beat the Brahmas. We have a real chance to get in the playoffs. We have a great defense. We have some good weapons. Tamu is the trouble spot right now. If I was them, I'd look at a guy like Ben DiNucci, who was super successful in spring football league last time he was in one. Led the most explosive offense in all of spring football, all of the XFL that year. I would absolutely be like, that's a guy we need to go get right now because he gives us a chance not only to like just make the playoffs, but to be honestly competitive in that playoff game, in that first round playoff game. They have a real chance of knocking off the Birmingham Stallions if they go get a guy like Ben DiNucci. So if I had to
Mhm.
give you 2 teams right now that he could end up on, one would be the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL, two would be the DC Defenders in the UFL.
Yeah, both would be great landing spots. I mean, I feel more realistically, Ben DiNucci is going to end up in the UFL, just because obviously he wants to play in the NFL, but the realisticness of it is that he's going to be a fourth quarterback. He's going to be that guy that's going to be the second, third, or not second, third, fourth string guy, maybe practice squad guy. And very rarely we'll get to see the field. He may decide that, I want to put more film together. I want to get on the field. I want to prove what I can do. And what better team to do that than with the DC Defenders? So I absolutely agree. That's a team that can win. Of course, there's some other teams that need quarterback help. But we're already so far along in the season that there's not really much hope for at least 4 out of the 8 teams, in regards to them attempting to make a playoff push and a championship run. The Defenders are one of those teams that can. I would also maybe even throw in the Brahmas a little bit, but I think Quentin Dormady has kind of solidified that spot for the Brahmas. So it could be very realistic. That the way the DC Defenders have faltered in games has been due to Jordan Ta'amu and him not protecting the ball. So you put Ben DiNucci in there, how will that change things? Um, and I probably will only change things in the better. So if they're really wanting to make a big push for the end of the season and in the playoffs and hopefully even the championship, if they can make it that far, I think signing Ben DiNucci would be a smart thing to do.
Yeah, no, I think the Defenders would make the most sense out of any of those teams. I think it would make sense for him because, like you said, he could put more film out there. He could go out there and demonstrate his ability a little better. Maybe get a chance as like a third string quarterback on another NFL team. Um, I think that's what he'd be hoping for, and so I would personally love to see that. I love Ben DiNucci. I think that would just be so exciting to see him back in the UFL.
Yeah. All righty. So we are now going to move on to our UFL post week 6 power rankings. We have a little bit of shuffling around in regards to some of the teams leapfrogging others. No big shifts, but without further ado, let's get right into it. Something that changed from our post week 5 power rankings is the Birmingham Stallions have now solidified themselves as the number 1 overall team. And the reason we put them a little bit higher than the Battlehawks this week is we believe they played a lot better than the Battlehawks did. And what was really concerning was the fact that the Battlehawks offensive line with injuries did not do well against a defense like Houston, and they showed the weaknesses that can be exploited for this St. Louis offense. Birmingham did not really have that in their game. They played a pretty great game altogether. A little slow of a start, but once they got cooking, they ended up just continuing to push on through, making great plays. There really wasn't any of those falterings like I thought I saw with the Battlehawks, and due to that factor, the Birmingham Stallions have leapfrogged the Battlehawks into the number 1 spot in terms of our Redzone Rodeo power rankings.
Yeah, at number 2, we got the Battlehawks. You just kinda talked a lot about it. They didn't look great for 3 quarters of football, and that certainly means something in this league where there's only, 40 quarters in a season. It's a really short season, so you gotta be on top of your game at all times, and, they were not. If their offensive coordinator keeps making, dumb decisions the way he did in this past game with the Roughnecks, where he doesn't take advantage of the other team's weaknesses, I could certainly see this team faltering and losing not even just to the Stallions, but in the first round of the playoffs. I still stand by my earlier statements where I think when this team is clicking, when this offense is hitting on all cylinders, it's unstoppable, right? When they get McCarron time to throw, when he's throwing the ball deep, all those weapons, there's no one in the league, Stallions or otherwise, who can compete with them. But we saw what really slowed them down this past week was the defensive line of the Roughnecks. And you know who has a much better defensive line than the Roughnecks do? Is the Birmingham Stallions.
Mhm.
So that'll be a real test for them this weekend. It'll be fascinating to see if their offensive line can figure something out to get McCarron time to throw the ball to all those weapons they have.
At number 3, we have the DC Defenders, who defeated the San Antonio Brahmas and are making it a close race in the XFL conference. Who's going to get that number 2 spot and gain access to the playoffs? Overall, they played really well defensively. Their defense really kept them in the game. Offense still had some struggles in regards to Jordan Tamu, but for the most part, they cleaned up a lot of the mistakes that they had previously made weeks before. Overall, did a better job, and defeating the San Antonio Brahmas has put them closer into contention with that number 2 spot. So at number 3, we have the DC Defenders.
At number 4, I think, in my opinion, the most surprising loss of this weekend was the San Antonio Brahmas losing to the Defenders. They still have a really well-rounded roster. I still like the weapons they have on offense, and I still like their defense. And I think they have a good quarterback, but they just were not able to get the job done this weekend. And if they can't do it against the Defenders, they have no hope of doing it against some of these better teams like the Battlehawks and the Stallions. So firmly at number 4, better than these other teams below them, but I don't think on the same level as these first 3 teams, which is crazy to say given that it was exactly opposite last week. So
At number 5, we have the Michigan Panthers. They're most likely going to get into the playoffs just based on the fact that Houston and Memphis are terrible record wise and even team wise, have a lot of struggles, a lot of holes. But they're sitting at number 5 mainly because they almost lost to the Renegades again. They relied on Jacob Bates' foot again to save them in a very close game. Danny Etling is certainly playing better, but still not great in regards to all the decisions he makes at quarterback. It's tough to put them anywhere higher than number 5, especially when the Brahmas defenders and Battlehawks have all been playing better than them. So at number 5, they will sit, but due to the fact that 2 teams in their conference are playing really bad football, they most likely are going to sneak into that playoffs with the number 2 spot.
Yeah, at number 6, we have the Houston Roughnecks. Their defense was super impressive this past weekend against the Battlehawks, managed to hold up for about 3.5 quarters. Their offense still really does not, scare anyone, it hasn't done anything all season long. But that defense is enough to, I think, put them above these last 2 teams, which really just don't have anything to show for themselves so far this season, so
Yeah, number 7, we have the Memphis Showboats. Really struggling offensive line wise. Case Cookus was hit multiple times, stayed on the ground for multiple times. Had to put Troy Williams back in. That really didn't do anything. This team struggles. There's a lot of good players on this roster, offensively and defensively, but unfortunately, they're not able to get any offensive production because of how bad that offensive line is. And especially without Case Cookus being in there, the offense kind of falls apart. So number 7, we have the Memphis Showboats.
yeah, and at number 8, we have, the Arlington Renegades. God, it's so sad. It's so bad. Everything is so bad, Carson. Life is plain. It's so, so, so bad. No one cares about this team, either on the roster or not on the roster. They just go out there and humiliate themselves every week. It doesn't matter who you put in front of them, they will find a way to lose it. They are just the worst team, not just in the UFL, but I feel like just in sports in general at this point. So, bottom of the barrel.
0-6.
Soon to be 0-7.
All righty. Well, we're going to be moving into our Red Zone Rodeo picks of the week for week 7 of the UFL. Thankfully, again, we do not have another week of football where games are going to be played simultaneously at the same time on the same day. So thankfully, hopefully you all will be able to watch them, tune in, and keep up with all the action. Breaking it down, of course, we still have those 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. Showboats at Renegades is your 1 p.m. Eastern game on ESPN. And the second game on Saturday is the one that we're all going to definitely be looking forward to. Battlehawks at Stallions. So that's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Fox. Moving into Sunday, we have a 12 p.m. Eastern time and a 3 p.m. Eastern time game. The first one is the Panthers at the Defenders, and the second one will be the Brahmas at the Roughnecks. Both of those games on ESPN. Going into our picks for each one of these games, Rob.
Well, I just kind of alluded to it. We have the Memphis Showboats beating the Arlington Renegades. I feel like if these teams were Madden rosters, the Renegades would be way higher than the Showboats, right? Like the Renegades have a much better roster, but just their ability to find ways to lose games is absolutely astounding. So I don't care who's across the field from them; they're still going to find a way to lose. Memphis Showboats will beat the Arlington Renegades this weekend.
Yeah, I think this actually might be a lot closer than people think. Um, just because I think, Memphis has struggled so much in so many different key positions, especially protecting the quarterback, and the Renegades make stupid mistakes. So it's really going to be who can fix the holes and who can fix the mistakes, and they're going to be the ones that end up winning the game. But we're going with the Memphis Showboats because we feel like they are able to get the job done more successfully than the Renegades, who have just proven that when it matters most, things will fall apart and it will be their fault.
It's
Showboats
it's
win.
It's really interesting. It's a bad team with lots of heart versus a good team who doesn't care at all. So it'll definitely be interesting to watch what happens.
Yeah. Moving into probably, and especially with the Red Zone Rodeo, probably the most hyped game of the season, Battlehawks at Stallions. This is going to be the game to tune into. If you can't see any of the other ones, make sure you watch this one. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be both teams going back and forth. Probably the best spring football that you will watch. Hopefully, it's everything that everyone has hyped it up to be, including us. But due to some of those, question marks that we saw from the Battlehawks playing against the Houston Roughnecks, especially that offensive line that we've been talking about, uh, we're going to say that the Birmingham Stallions are going to walk away victorious in week 7. They also have the home crowd advantage. Expect it to be very hype in Birmingham. I'm sure with especially this big game, there's probably going to be a lot of fan attendance. So it's going to be loud. But we're going to see what the number one ranked offense in the UFL can do against the number one ranked defense in the UFL. And we'll see which team comes out on top. But for all intents and purposes, the Red Zone Rodeo pick of the week is going to be the Birmingham Stallions.
Yeah, I am so excited for this game. You said it. It's going to be, I think this will be the best spring football game since like the 1980s when guys like Herschel Walker were still playing in, the USFL. I don't honestly know when you've seen a collection of talent this good on both sides in a spring football game this millennium. So, absolutely something everyone should be watching. Oh, then we have the Michigan Panthers versus the DC Defenders. The Panthers have kind of been on and off this season. They were on a roll for a little bit, then they lost a little bit. They just haven't really seemed to be the complete team yet. Honestly, you could probably say the same thing about the DC Defenders, but they've been competing at a higher level, mostly because their defense has really just been lights out, especially the past few weeks. So we're going to give them the win here over the Michigan Panthers.
Yeah, they seem to have everything together. The Panthers are still struggling, especially with EJ Perry's absence. I just don't know how much faith I have in Danny Etling to get the job done, especially against this dominant DC Defender defense, which has kept them in games, especially when their offense have made mistakes. Um, so, especially with key defensive players on Michigan being out for the season, those are going to just be holes that I don't know if Michigan can even fill at this point in the season in terms of talent wise. And so, prepare. I would say this game is going to be close. The Panthers are going to keep it close, especially having that secret weapon with Jacob Bates' leg being able to kind of help gain extra points. But I really feel like this DC Defender defense is going to be able to lock down this game and take the win. And the last game that we have is the Brahmas at the Roughnecks. And I do think that the Brahmas are probably going to win this game. Before I probably would have said they would have ran away with the game. It wouldn't have been close. But seeing how the Roughnecks defense played against the Battlehawks has given me a little bit of hope in, the Roughnecks defense in terms of keeping the game close. Now we'll see if, the offense of Houston can keep up with the Brahmas offense, but the Brahmas defense is really tough, and it's going to be tough for Reed Sennett and a lot of these other offensive playmakers on Houston to be able to get the job done. And due to that, I think, your defense can only play strong if, they're not in the field 24/7. And if they are, eventually holes will find a way to open and players get tired. So if that's the case, I think the Roughnecks will ultimately lose this game, and that is why we are choosing the San Antonio Brahmas to be the Red Zone Rodeo pick of the week for this game.
I mean, the Brahmas have a better overall team because I think Dormandy is a better quarterback than anyone the Roughnecks have, and I think the Brahmas have better offensive weapons than anyone the Roughnecks have. But I agree. I think this is going to be a really close game, especially with the way the Brahmas offense struggled last week and the way the Roughnecks defense stepped up. But I think ultimately the Roughnecks offense is going to, do what it does and not do anything really. So that will lead to the Brahmas probably winning a close one, would be my guess.
All righty, folks. Well, we're going to be moving into our final segment of the show, the Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week. And to start us off today, we have famed Roughnecks player Mark Thompson and his cryptic retirement tweets that he ended up tweeting out on his page in Mark We Trust on X, I guess. It really probably should be called X. But regardless, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. After the Roughnecks got beat by the Battlehawks, he ended up tweeting out a lot of these messages saying, "It's been a cool 7 years. My only regret is turning down practice squad as a rookie," and then a weird smiley face emoji with a hand hitting the top of its head. So, this obviously, led to some speculation among Roughnecks fans that Mark Thompson's going to retire. Of course, he came out afterwards and was like, "Nah, guys, I was just playing," and trying to gain probably more attention. But still, why would you do this, Mark Thompson? Why would you go on to your social media platform and give all your fans a scare. But also, why would you act like you wanted to, retire? You're clearly a great player. You showed that even in the game against the Battlehawks, where you showed how you were able to weave in and out, and that you can be a competent running back in this league. Why would you retire just because your team around you is failing? Kind of stupid in my opinion. And just stop going on social media and doing this, because it gets you attention, but in a way it kind of gets you the wrong attention. So Mark Thompson, you are a Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week. Stop with these tweets. Just play football. You're good at that, and let's stay with that.
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty funny. Like coming from the outside, I'm like, oh, that's great. One of their best players is just like randomly causing rumors that he might leave the team. Immediately after a big loss against a great opponent. It's probably like the worst possible thing he could have done in that moment. So yeah, absolutely, Mark Thompson. Although your Twitter is like the most fun thing I've ever seen, and it's just so much,
It is.
joy to read through it. You are officially the Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week.
Keep playing well, buddy.
Oh yeah, Showboat's offensive line, they have not been good. They have gotten every quarterback that stood behind them hurt in one way or another. They cannot block anybody. I mean, I know this might just be somewhat of like a talent disparity, right? Maybe the guys on that offensive line aren't necessarily the best, but honestly, at this point, it seems like they're not even really trying that hard to, keep their quarterback clean. Kind of like the Renegades, where it's just like they're kind of, done already before they even get out there. They're basically just like laying down the red carpet to opposing defensive lines. I mean, like, here's our quarterback, come get him. That's just not what you ever want to see from your offensive line. Even if they're not good, you want to see them at least still have that competitive, like, nastiness where they're like upset that they're giving up sacks. It just kind of seems absent from this offensive line. So whoever the Showboats quarterback is, I feel bad for you because your offensive line is a Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. This certainly has a ripple effect, because the offensive line is so bad. One of your first picks in the draft was to go out and get a great quarterback in Case Cookus. The first thing that I would think you would want to do is make sure that he's upright, protected, so that he's able to, you know, get the ball to your playmakers on the offense. And that's not what the Showboats have done. The Showboats, unfortunately, have done the opposite in regards to their offensive line regressing, not gelling together, causing holes, and getting Case Cookus hurt, where pretty much every single game in the most, last couple weeks, Case Cookus has left the game with injuries, bruises, or it's been, the coach's decision to bench him because he doesn't want to get hurt. That is awful. And how are you supposed to build a great offense, especially in with one of the most important positions on the offense being the quarterback, even if you have a great guy like Case Cookus and a great player? If you can't protect him, then he's just going to be sitting on the bench hurt. And yeah, the offensive line needs to get better. This is something they should have thought about coaching wise before the season. And unfortunately, the offensive line has only gotten quarterbacks and players hurt on the Showboats. And for that reason, the Showboats offensive line, you are a Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week. And last but not least, our take on the Brahmas being better than the Defenders. Of course, with all of our fun, we like to poke a little bit of fun at certain players and teams and coaching staffs and whatnot, based on the fact that, sometimes just dumb decisions get made. And, but we also need to reflect on ourselves, because, this was certainly not a great take in regards to our thoughts on who was going to win against the Brahmas and the Defenders. We believe the Brahmas were better. We believe that they could have, easily defeated the Defenders, and that's not what happened. It was I would say, an upset in a way, but the Defenders showed themselves to be a better team this past week, and so we ate our own words. And so we poke fun at others, but there's also some self reflection here, because we certainly swung and missed on this one. And so, yeah, we are Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week, because we thought the Brahmas were better than the Defenders. And they did not prove that at all this past weekend when they dropped the ball against the Defenders.
Yeah, and it's not just we said, oh, the Brahmas are going to win this game, but who knows? We were like, Brahmas will absolutely win this game because the Defenders had really been a shaky team up until that point. And the Brahmas had been really good. I remember last week us talking about, how the Brahmas were like up there in that upper tier with the Battlehawks and the Stallions, and the Defenders were like way, way in the other tier, not even really competitive. I remember when we were making our power rankings last week, we were debating whether 4 was too high for the Defenders because I think we had them number 4 behind the Brahmas. And we're like, oh, are we sure that's the right spot?
Yeah.
And at least for myself, when I saw the line, because I was betting on the games this weekend, that the Brahmas were only favored by 1.5 points. I'm like, oh, that's like the slam dunk of the weekend. Obviously, they're going to win by at least that much. And then the Defenders ended up winning the game. So I think I know, at least for me personally, I really in my head had the Brahmas as like a much significantly better team than the Defenders. So for the Defenders to come in and prove us wrong, especially me wrong, given how sure I was of this, absolutely, this is a Red Zone Rodeo clown of the week take right here. So
Self-reflection hurts sometimes. How
it does.
much money did you lose, Rob?
I lost, I think, $20. I had a parlay of all 4 games, right? I bet the outcome of all 4 games, and I had the first 2 right. Then came the Renegades game, and I bet that the Michigan Panthers would win by at least 4 points. They weren't able to do that. So not only did the Renegades lose and break my heart, they scored just enough points for my bet to lose and break my wallet as well. So they've hurt me in more ways than one this past weekend.
Wow. Heart and wallet, two important factors right there.
Yes, not fun. They find ways to hurt me even when I don't believe in them anymore.
Oh my gosh. Well, guys, thank you so much for sticking around and watching this video. Um, you know, I feel like we do this every show, but we really are very thankful for you all watching, staying tuned, liking, subscribing, sharing these videos, growing the community, growing the channel. I'm sure Rob can also attest. This is one of our favorite times, just being able to kind of get on and talk football, and we may have some bad takes. We may have some certain things that we get wrong. But that's the whole fun of it. That's the fun of making predictions, talking about it. It's generating conversation, generating community, and that's the best part about sports in general, especially football, is the community. And so we just want to thank you so much for liking and subscribing and sharing and all those things and sticking with us and giving your time of day to hear us talk about these things. It's really means a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like Carson said, this is one of my favorite things in the world to do is just get on here and talk about football. So anytime you watch, it means the world. Thank you guys so much. Please keep watching if you are watching. We're gonna have a lot of great stuff coming up, a lot of football to talk about. The rest of the UFL season, training camp will be coming up here in a few months. And even though the NFL might be slowing down here for the next 30 days or so until training camp starts, there's always going to be a lot to talk about, especially with the UFL going on right now. So the NFL might be slowing down or not. Make sure you stick around.
Absolutely. And make sure to tell your friends if you love this channel, if you like what we're talking about, please tell your friends, family, and let's grow this community together. But until next time, guys, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the games. Have maybe don't make stupid bets like Rob has done. Make more better bets. But have a good time. Enjoy the games. We'll catch you next time, and stay safe out there. All right, guys. Until next time. See ya.